Oh, him? Yeah, I know him. It's going to take a while. It happened years ago. Did you know there are three kinds of aces? Those who seek strength, those who live for pride, and those who can read the tide of battle. Those are the three. And him? He was a true ace.
Ace Combat Zero is a game that came out in 2006 for the PlayStation 2 and was the final game of 3 released on the system. I've covered the first in another video. I've made many videos on games I consider to be great, some of the best, but that's not the case here. Ace Combat Zero is the best game I've ever played, and I'll explain why in this video. The game starts off with an intro narration from a soldier on a battlefield near some border, and he recounts his story of his former wingman. The story takes place from the perspective of a news reporter creating a documentary on a war that happened 15 years prior, the Belkan War, and his search for a legendary pilot referred to as the Demon Lord. His search has him interview former enemies who came up against him and documents the effects the legendary pilot had on their lives. The premise of the story centers on the Belkan War, which is where your game begins. A once powerful nation named Belka has fallen on harsh economic times, and in a bid to fix it, allows part of their territories to secede and become independent nations. One of these nations eventually discovers vast natural resources within its borders. In response, Belka builds up its industrial and military capacities to a ridiculous level, and proceeds to forcefully annex their former territories in a surprise attack. And due to their legendary and overwhelming air force, all the surrounding nations quickly fall to their might. All areas bar a select few regions in the mountains are taken. To compare it to the real world, this game is essentially an alternate reality World War II that happened in the 90s, and Germany had access to ridiculous fighter aircraft. With most nations defeated by the overwhelming surprise attack, a joint force of allied nations forms, and begins to hire mercenaries to bolster their forces. Your character is one of these, a mercenary by the name of Garm 1, callsign Cypher. The campaign begins with you intercepting a Belkan bomber squadron sent to destroy one of the last non-captured air bases, an allied strongpoint. It is here that you are introduced to your wingman, Garm 2, callsign Solo Wing Pixy, the soldier being interviewed at the start of the game. One thing that stands out about this game as opposed to the other two Ace Combat games is that it never lets up. The older games had a few missions, especially Ace Combat 5, that weren't the greatest, and some overstayed their welcome. Not Ace Combat Zero. From start to finish, it is distilled greatness that you've come to expect from the previous two fantastic games, with none of the downsides. On top of that, I've never heard a better soundtrack in my life. Some really good games have several great tracks, but this is the only one that I would genuinely say doesn't have a single bad track. There's a mix of flamenco, orchestra, guitar, and synths, and they all just work too well. Towards the end of the game, it continually outdoes itself and hits you with a flurry of tracks that makes even the biggest budget AAA movie soundtrack look like a children's school recital. Back to the first mission. You are quickly established as a force to be reckoned with as you handily stop the bomber fleet and save the Allied base, providing a foothold to work further inland and to reclaim more territory. The next few missions have you capturing key points such as supply lines and the like. After that, the game starts weaving in Arthurian mythology into the mix, and introduces the earlier mentioned area containing vast natural resources, known as B7R, or the Round Table, called as such since every pilot flying these skies was on equal footing with no ranks or affiliations to hold them back. The Arthurian theme recurs throughout the rest of the game, and really gives the game an epic feel to it. Over the Round Table, Cypher makes a name for himself as the Demon Lord of the Round Table, for his absolute dominance over the skies, single-handedly turning the tide of battle into the Allies' favour. It is also here that the game starts introducing rival ace squadrons, which vary depending on how you play the game, between mercenary class, for players who destroy everything for the maximum reward, soldier class, for those who read the tide of battle, and knight class, for those who strictly fight for honour and only destroy the designated targets. The game goes out of its way to make you feel like Jesus in a fighter jet, as every succeeding mission and enemy squadron you face can be heard gradually becoming more terrified of your presence, and conversely, your allies gaining hope just hearing that you're the reinforcements. Around halfway through the game, you're making solid progress liberating the countries taken by Belkan, and it looks like the allies are gonna win, when Belkan starts taking drastic measures. They start deploying some absolutely crazy shit to stop the Allied advance, such as a skyscraper-sized fuck-off huge laser known as Excalibur, which you are sent out to destroy. Such is your reputation by this point that the thing is targeted specifically at you for the entire time. Your player ends up pulling the so-called sword from the stone and fires the killing blow to stop it. It's at this point the Belkan start considering you an actual demon, and for the rest of the game, all the enemies start reacting as such. Just when you think the game is about to end, you're sent on a supposed bombing mission, which you end up seeing as nothing more than a reckless firebombing of a city, something which greatly affects some of the Allied pilots who witness the atrocity, as well as your wingman. Shortly after you're sent in on an emergency mission to stop a supposed nuclear-equipped bomber squadron. In any other game, the hero would save the day and the bad guy would be stopped, but not here. Upon shooting down what you think was the last bomber, it is revealed that it was all just a farce. And 7 nuclear bombs go off within Belkan territory, enacting a scorched earth policy to stop the inevitable Allied advance. Witnessing such an atrocity, several squadrons, as well as your wingman, turn hostile and defect to the enemy side. Having grown tired of the war, Pixy opens fire on you and leaves the airspace, presumably never to be seen again. All throughout the game, the interviewer speaks to some of the pilots who you've encountered along the way, and they describe in their own terms what facing you was like. It's recorded in live action, as opposed to the previous game's animated cutscenes and CGI cutscenes respectively, and it works really well. The expressions conveyed by the actors would be difficult even today to replicate, let alone back in 2006. It gives the game a ton of immersion.
I'm actually rather fond of it.
Many games have pretty good endings, and other Ace Combat games have fantastic endings, but Zero takes it to the next level. The Allied forces discover that all the pilots who defected have joined a far-right Belkan extremist group named A World of No Boundaries, and are hell-bent on ending the concept of borders altogether, by force, to stop wars like this from ever occurring again. Their base of operations is discovered beneath a dam called Avalon, located within the Valley of Kings, and you're sent in on what may as well be a suicide mission, with the remaining Allied pilots to stop them. You head back over the round table and face the strongest enemy squadron in the game. Without even a break to breathe, you must navigate the Valley of Kings, while the rest of the allies go down like flies. All hope seems lost till you somehow manage to break through. You then fly underground in a goddamn jet to destroy the control panels, which control the enemy's ultimate weapon, a V2 MIRV warhead. All the while, the music playing makes you feel like King Arthur himself is awakened to save the world. Without even getting time to breathe, your former wingman, Pixy, returns in an absolutely ridiculous laser jet known as the Morgan, and shoots down your new wingman and challenges you to a 1v1. Still, without giving you time to breathe, you 1v1 Pixy to the absolute best final track in video game history. Meanwhile, you have to fight at supersonic speed, all the while trying to avoid being lasered to pieces. Straight after that, he starts lobbing tactical fucking nukes at you. Then immediately after that, it's revealed he's controlling the V2 launch remotely from his experimental fighter. And activates his ultimate defense system, rendering him invulnerable to all attacks except from front on. Rendering him invulnerable to all attacks except from head on. You then have to joust him at supersonic speeds while a nuclear missile rises in the background. The ending is absolutely unmatched by any game either before or since. It just dials the notch up to 11 and keeps going. The game finally ends on an interview with Pixy, who explains why he did what he did and that he feels remorse for what happened. The interviewer never finds out if you actually existed, but he manages to find out what sort of person Cypher was in the eyes of his enemies.
Yo, buddy. Still alive? And thanks, friend. See you again.
The Demon Lord of the Round Table. A warrior who soared through the Belkan War, inspiring both fear and admiration. His presence filled the skies for but a few short months before he disappeared. Apart from that, nothing is known about him.
To top it all off, the game's ending credits song is absolutely world class and wraps up the best game you'll ever play. If you ever get a chance to pick this up for PS2, do it.